All right, welcome to the Advent calendar for day 21. It's almost Christmas. We're getting there. Today is Hudson rye. Now, luckily, I've had the chance of trying this multiple times, including with Ralph Renzo, who came to the school and attended the level 1 whiskey sommelier course. Not because he needed to be taught about whiskey, but because he thought it would be a cool thing to hang out with us and get to experience it. We'd invited him as a guest to pour all of his whiskeys for our sommeliers, and he said, well, since I'm going to be there for that, why don't I just sit through the whole thing? So you could take a master class from Ralph about the history of whiskey, especially the history of pre-Prohibition era New York whiskey, because he became the first distillery in New York, he and his partner Brian, since Prohibition. They had to fight all of these laws and get things changed and argue about what needed to be made where, and then based on the back of that, he got into the political side of whiskey legislation and helped pioneer all these groups to push for better legislation for craft distilleries and craft spirit producers and craft beer producers, for that matter, but mostly in the Spirits Association. And he and the groups that he helped found have been instrumental in helping create a current legislation that would lower the tax burden on craft distilleries. So he's doing just gangbusters on amazing things for the entire industry. He's a damn fine human being. We were grateful to get to hang out with him. Now, remember, Rex and I are not really rye whiskey fans. Don't hate it. It's just not our preferred home turf. But this is cool, man. And there was some, I got to tell you a really funny story that he told us about the Tuttletown Spirits. Oh, yep, there's the rye. I mean, right at the beginning, you get the strong cereal rye notes and the slight kind of dill and fennel. But there's also a lot of barrel and even some cinnamon in there. I mean, you picked that up. There's zero question in your mind. You just picked up a rye. But it's dramatic enough that you also know yeah, this is just a really good, if you're going to pick a craft distillery rye to start with, this would be a good one to start with. It's a little pricey. Now, what I remember tasting in this when I did it, when he brought the whiskeys, was I remember something that caught me totally off guard, which was a little hint of mint running in this thread through the whole whiskey. It's sort of like just in the midst of this massive quilt, there's this one gold thread making its way through the quilt, and that unexpected gold thread is mint. I've never really picked up a rye and gotten such a dominant strain of mint that didn't take over the whole whiskey. It was always a part of the fabric, but it never really dominated. And it helps me get into this one a little more than I would otherwise. It takes the edge off of the fennel and the anise notes. It takes the edge off of the dill heavy rye notes, you know. And I've also could tell you that if you let this breathe a little, it relaxes and becomes a little more approachable. Yeah, that's a freakishly smooth rye as far as ryes go. That's cool. This is fun, man. There was a story that Ralph told when he was here about, for a while they sold these double char whiskeys, and I think it's a bourbon. I can't remember. I have it hidden in here somewhere, but they sold these double char, and so he said, so what's the story on double char? What does that even mean? He said, well, one day we were standing outside the front of the distillery, and upstairs you have all the rack rooms, all the barrels are, and essentially the short version, I can't remember what led to it, but essentially what happened is there was an explosion and it blew all the windows out on the upstairs floor, and the explosion hit the barrels all aging upstairs and set things on fire. Now, the explosion was a vapor explosion, I think, and so it just kind of went, it was a flash explosion. And so when they got it all out and figured it out and solved it, they had all of these chars. There's a banging on the door. That's totally Rex. They had all these barrels that were double charred. They charred on the outside and the inside, but they weren't linking. So they set them all aside and they just said, let's wait and see what happens with those. And eventually they did a bottling of just those. And it was called Double Char. This is going to be a longer episode. Hang on a second. I'm going to go let Rex in. All right, anyway, so if you can find that, what Ralph said was, if you can find that double charred whiskey, get it, because even he doesn't have a bottle anymore. It's a super rare. It's basically was a whole run of small barrels, the charred bourbon barrels, that were also charred on the exterior but never really leaked. So, yeah, we've got one. I managed to find, actually I think I have two, because I managed to find two at a local store. And when I showed it to him, he's like, where'd you get those? So, anyway. So as far as ryes go, this is a nice one. It'll do. It'll do. And rock and roll. Until tomorrow, may your crazy stay this side illegal, and may you return before we have time to miss you. Cheers.